Hello, and welcome back to another episode with It's Dr. Dan, and we're going to be continuing to go through math skills to ace chemistry. Remember, this playlist is all about trying to learn all your basic chemistry math skills to help you pass your chemistry courses. And today we're going to be looking at the order of operations, which is something you learned probably back in grade school a long time ago. But we're going to go through the different order of operations, how to look at them, and how to round them when it comes to different mathematical formulas, which is really commonly seen whether it's in General Chemistry 1 or in Introductory Chemistry. When you are using different formulas or parentheses, sometimes you'll see it commonly in dimensional analysis, just doing basic multiplication and division, but you're going to be seeing it in using a lot of different applications. So what is it? Well, that's going all back to what we remember from a long time ago, which is PEMDAS. So we're going to be looking into that. If you can kind of really remember from a long time ago, what was PEMDAS? And you can remember that little saying, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which is all about all the different operations you can do with math, whether it would be parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. You saw all these different things. And that's what we're going to be looking at as we are going through this and going through the steps of PEMDAS, which as you read that saying from left to right, that's the order that you will do operations in, meaning that we do parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication, then division, then addition, then subtraction. So throughout this video, we're going to go through many different examples, going over the significant rules of this, and how you can round these answers so that way you're getting the correct answers in your chemistry course when you are using them all the time. All right, so stay tuned for different examples, and please hit that like and subscribe button to help support the channel. Thank you. So in our first example of this problem, what we're going to be doing is something that has multiple operations. So as I said before, what we're going to be really looking at here is try to look at a couple little tips. First thing it says is parentheses. Looking at the problem, it says 18.7 divided by 1.38 plus 5.1. The key is whenever you see fractions, the first thing I would always recommend to do is assume the following. So we have two parts of a fraction, and we'll have a video on fractions later, but you have your numerator, which is on top, and then your denominator, which is on bottom. What I always like to do for myself is assume that these are always both in parentheses. So that means you carry out the operations on top and the operations on bottom before proceeding to do the fraction. Because whenever you have a fraction, that represents a division. Okay, so that is just that you're dividing and you're going to carry that out like normal. However, we need to make sure we do the other operations first. So the bottom, right, you see that addition, it's in parentheses. We have to carry that out first. So let's go through and do that part of the problem. So 1.38 plus 5.1. When you plug all that into your calculator, you're going to see you will get 6.48. Now, we do the next step. So we did addition, we did parentheses first. Now we have division between top and bottom. We will carry out the 18.7 divided by 6.48 to get 2.8858. Now, is that the right way to show the answer? Well, this is where we're going to go through all the different forms of how to round. And one of the things when it comes to rounding is this takes practice, so we need to learn our rounding with sig figs again. So this is something that keeps coming back. So definitely watch the earlier videos in the series about rounding so you know the basics. Now we're going to apply it to different orders or operation. When we are going through here, the idea is that with multiplication division, the final answer must be rounded to the same number of sig figs as the number with the fewest sig figs. So when we are going through this, we need to always figure out what the fewest number of sig figs are. Multiplication division is the easier of the two rules. So when we are looking for this, what we are going to be seeing is that, all right, if I have this example down here, we have 4.50, which if you remember how to count those sig figs, right? We have 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 sig figs. And on the right-hand number, we have 1, 2 sig figs, meaning that our final answer for, so when we solve this, is going to have 2 significant figures. Now there's another part of this rule that we got to keep in mind too, and that has to do with the units. Now the units are all about, when multiplying and dividing, is that you're essentially you're combining the units to either find the product or the quotient. So after either you multiply it or you divide it, and you're taking that product or quotient of those original units. What does that even mean? So with this one down here, we're multiplying these. So if we're taking the product. So if I have centimeter times centimeter, what's going to be my product? Well, think of if you're measuring a room, right? If you or measure an apartment, it's always reported in like square foot or things like that. Well, this time centimeter times centimeter is square centimeter. And that's what we're going to have. So this would be centimeters squared will be our units. And then we'll carry this out. So 4.50 times 2.5 is going to give you a number of 11.25 centimeters squared. However, what we're going to have to do is round this. So we said 2 sig figs is what we need. So we'll round this to the second sig fig spot, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll round that to the second spot. Usually we just underline it once to show that, meaning that our final answer is going to be 11 centimeters squared, or our final answer in this problem. So that's how you do for multiplication division. Let's go to the next one. As you can see, we have the following problem. This time it's division. So a couple things we got to do first. First, let's count our number of sig figs. So we have 1, 2, 3 sig figs. For the next one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sig figs. So we have that. Now the idea is that you bring down whatever the lowest number of sig figs was. 3 is our lowest amount. So what we are going to do here is our final answer, when we solve for it, is going to have 3 significant figures in the final answer. Now, what about the units? Well, let's think about how this is going to be. It has to be the quotient of the units because we are dividing here. So one way that you can show this problem is really going to be helpful for dimensional analysis and unit conversion is let's rewrite the problem. So we have 3.0 grams all over 1.5000 milliliters. And as you can see, we're writing this in the form of a fraction. So when you are showing this, well, all we have to do is simplify the fraction. So if we do that, right, 3 divided by 1.5, and you can think like, oh, that's just 2, right? But we need to make sure we put it as 3 sig figs. So when you do that, right, so it would be 2.00, and that would be grams all over 1 milliliter. Or the way you can also show that is 2.00 grams over milliliters, and you can write that sideways just like that. And that's how we can show a different derived unit, which can be very helpful. And this is something that represents density, which is going to be one of your most common things that you're going to be using when you do general chemistry labs, especially probably around those first couple weeks of lab. You're going to commonly use density to go from mass to volume, for whether it's for liquids or for different solids as well. All right, so that's for multiplication division. Let's go on to the next one for addition and subtraction. Okay, so for addition and subtraction, the final answer has to be the same number of decimal places as the number with the fewest decimal places. And you're probably reading that like, what? Well, when we're going through this, we're going to be counting the decimals, meaning how many numbers there are past that point. Whichever has the lowest number of decimals is what's going to be actually defining our number of sig figs. So the other thing to keep in mind too is when we have units, you can only do addition subtraction for things with the same units. So if being that we are taking measurements very often in lab, if we're doing grams, right, so masses, they have to be all the same mass, same exact unit, same prefix as well. So when we do unit conversion videos, prefixes matter. They also have to be the same volumes and things like that. So multiplication, division, you can combine whatever you want. But when it comes to addition, subtraction, they have to be the same. So when we do our first example here, we see that we have 0.0456 meters plus 1.14 meters plus 0.00148 meters. And in this problem, they are all the same unit. They're all meters, so we can add this up. Now, earlier I mentioned that we have to make sure that we are counting how many significant values are after the decimal, and that's what's going to affect our rounding. So for this first number, right, we have 3 values past the decimal. This next one, we have 2 sig figs after. Even though this entire number, keep in mind, is 3 sig figs, so the whole number is still 3. But for addition, we only worry about the decimals, so there's 2 of them. In the next value, there are 3 sig figs after the decimal. So when we are doing these calculations, what are we going to have for our final answer? So we're going to have 2 sig figs after the decimal for our final answer, okay? So keep that in mind. This is what is going to be affecting that. So let's rewrite the problem so it looks like more like a normal addition problem. You can plug this into your calculator, being that most likely in your Gen Chem class, you will be allowed to use a calculator. Very rarely does a teacher say no. So we're going to write these out so that way you can see all the decimals lined up, just like how you used to do back in grade school. So we'll line up the decimal. We'll line up our units just like this. And we are going to be adding up all those values. So as we mentioned, we're going to have 2 decimal places. So this is going to be rounding to right here where that little line is. So when we add all this up, so if you plug this in your calculator, you're going to get 1.18708. And we're going to be rounding that to that second decimal place, meaning that 8 is next to 7. And if you remember from our previous video, we're going to round up as a result. So being that we are rounding up here, this is going to be equal to 1.19 meters for our final answer here. Let's go on to the next part. All right, now let's put it all together. Let's go back to the example from earlier. So going back to PEMDAS, meaning, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, when we are doing combined operations is when things can get a little confusing and a little hard, but with patience and some little tips, this can be very easy to do. So first rule for this is you wait until the end to round your problem. Do it at the very last step. As you're going through your steps, whether it's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, each operation you do, underline the significant value or that you should be rounding that step to. So meaning when we go through, let's say, a multiplication step, and that's first, we're going to put a little line to say, okay, this should be 2 sig figs or 3. So let's go through the first problem and show how we would do that problem again, but with proper rounding. So the first thing I said is make sure you pretend that the top and bottom are in the proper parentheses. So we are going to first do the bottom. So this is going to be 18.7 divided by 1.38 plus that 5.1. So when we do the bottom, we can see that we have how many sig figs we got on each part. We have 1, 2 on the left and only 1 on the right. So that means we are going to have just 1 decimal place after this addition operation. So when we write that down and have our number here, we are going to underline that. So we have 6.48. We're going to underline 1 after for our notes for ourselves for later. So that way we are keeping track. Now in our next part, which is, so we did addition first, add in parentheses. Now we are going to divide, right? So multiply, divide. So when we do this, 18.7 divided by 6.48, what we will get is our answer that we had before. So 2.8858. And when we divide, we take the lowest number of sig figs. We can see that both parts of this, what would we have? Well, we have 3 sig figs on the top, right? So this will go to the third spot. And being that the number on the bottom would have been rounded to 2 sig figs, we have 3 and then 2 from our operation. So when we are doing that, that denominator is going to be affecting our rounding. So we'll take that 8, round it up, and our final answer is going to be 2.9, showing those 2 sig figs. And as you're kind of going through these, if there's units involved, we would keep them, and we would put them in our final answer as well. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at. Let's do one last example of combined operations with units to show all of it together with rounding. So on this last example, what we're going to be actually looking at is this problem above. So what we can see is that there is a very big problem with multiple steps in it, many different types of units. So what we have above is 12.489 centimeters minus 4.234 centimeters times 30.72 kilograms divided by 25.5 seconds. Oh, that's a lot. So we got to remember our units. That was one of the big tips I put here. So let's do the first part, which is parentheses. So we can do the parentheses, we can subtract because they are the same units. So when we do that, what we're going to get is 8.255 centimeters times that 30.72 kilograms divided by that 25.5 seconds. And I'm going to leave that in parentheses just so you can kind of remember where that came from. Now, one thing we have to do is keep track of sig figs. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3 sig figs for each of those values after the decimal. So that means that this one did not get affected at all from our rounding. So we're going to leave it at that point. So we know that it's going to be 3 after the decimal. So, okay, so that's good to know for later. The next step is, remember that I said that everything that is in the denominator and the numerator, assume that they are in parentheses. So we're going to assume the top and the bottom are in parentheses. So we're going to do our order of operation or multiplication on top first. So when we take 8.255 times 30.72, we are going to get 253.5936 divided by 25.5 seconds. So that would have been the next part, right? That would have been your multiplication. I'm going to label those for us. So when we do that step, what we have to do is count our sig figs again. So what we have is 4 sig figs on the left and 4 sig figs on the right. So we're still right around that same point, still at 4 sig figs. Our next portion is divide, which when we have these two values, so we have our 4 sig figs from the top number, and then we have a total of 3 sig figs on the bottom. What this tells us is finally we have a number that's going to affect our sig figs. So we are going to have 3 sig figs as our final answer. So when we carry that out, remember we saved rounding for last. So I'm just going to write every value that we have on our calculator. So we have 9.44847. And when we are doing that as well, we should also be keeping our units in here, which I realized mine kind of disappeared. So on the step before, centimeters and kilograms, they multiplied together, so they stayed. And then we also have seconds. So this thing is going to be centimeters, kilograms, all over seconds. It's this big derived unit that we are making here. So centimeters times kilograms, all over seconds. Now, being that we said that we're going to be rounding this to 3 sig figs, so we're going to round it right here. this is going to equal 9.94 centimeters times kilograms divided by seconds. So this was a tougher problem, right? So with these types of problems, they can have all kinds of different amounts of difficulty to them, depending on what you have to do. Most problems are not as tough as this last one. So when it comes to this, hopefully this kind of helped you see like what you can do when it comes to rounding. It helped you with your homework when you're going through many different problems like this. When you're doing your orders operations, just remember, right? Remember PEMDAS, remember please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and remember your rounding rules. So don't forget parentheses, then exponents, multiply and divide, then addition, subtraction. I hope this video helped you as you try to go through all of your future problems when it comes to your chemistry homework. All right, I'll see you soon for our next video when it comes to helping you ace chemistry, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. All right, now, bye now.